Hi everybody, this is Diana, aka Pop Culture Diva 42, and this is another versus match with a twist. And since the last one of these that I did, other people have been doing versus match with a twist, like Deadpoolzilla and Mount Vernon Kid. But I had this really cool idea, and I just wanted to do one. My idea was, who is the best vigilante serial killer? And it comes down between Punisher, Frank Castle, and Dexter Morgan from the Showtime or the FX TV show. I think it's Showtime, but it could be FX. The TV show of the same name, Dexter, just simply Dexter. And I talked to Deadpoolzilla beforehand, and Deadpoolzilla campaigned for me to include Rorschach in this, but based on my own reasoning for this versus match, namely that I want you to ask yourselves, who would you want to be real? Who would you be okay with if they existed in reality? You know, who in your mind would actually make the world a safer place without starting to kill, random people? And based on that reasoning, I will give Rorschach an honorable mention, but in my mind he doesn't qualify because, first of all, he was part of a team at some point, and being part of a team means that you have to make compromises, you have to sacrifice the dedication to the calling. And Punisher and Dexter work alone most of the time. Dexter has a sidekick from time to time, and Punisher has worked with other people, but they've never really been part of a team. And also with Rorschach, I really feel like he has a problem not necessarily with just criminals and with bad people. He has a problem with the whole world that produces those criminals and those really bad people. Because there's that quote in Watchmen that is very telling. The world will look up and scream, "Save us," and I'll look down and say, "No." And that doesn't make me feel very safe, to be honest. I kind of think like if Rorschach was real, he would have something against me for my apathy or for my whatever. I feel like he would have a problem with the world, not just the bad people that I personally want him to get rid of. So that's why in my mind, Rorschach is disqualified. But, I don't know that much about the character. I've only read the graphic novel once, maybe twice. So feel free to choose Rorschach if you want, but personally I find the comparison and the parallel between Punisher and Dexter a lot more interesting, namely because going from the question who would you want to be real, it leads to the question, who is crazier? Because obviously with Frank Castle and Dexter Morgan, these are some really, really messed up people. And you have to ask yourself, who would you trust more out of these two to keep on point and to respect their mission and to never, ever, ever lash out against people that may not deserve it? That's the big question. And, I find it so fascinating that both of these guys went through some very traumatic events at different points in their lives. But at the same time, they're both... violence is so much a part of their being. And with Frank Castle, he was literally bred for violence. He's a war veteran. He's an ex-Marine, I think. So violence has always been part of his life. And he went for that traumatic event that I'm talking about, losing his family at an older age, but it completely unhinged him. Whereas Dexter, he witnessed the death of his mother at a very young age. And you have to ask yourselves, would he grow up to be a monster regardless of what he saw? Or was that traumatic event the birth of Dexter the monster? And again, violence has always been part of his life because of that event. And at the same time, he kind of, much like Batman, I imagine, he turned himself into the weapon that he is. He turned himself towards this calling of his. But so on the one hand, you have Frank Castle, which has always been a violent person and used that in different ways. And Dexter Morgan, who's always had violence in his heart, or that darkness, that desire to kill people was always in his heart because of what happened when he was a very young kid. Now, which one of these two characters would you think is more unstable? Which is the crazier of the two? Now, I don't want this to turn like in a physical fight, because I honestly think the Punisher would wipe the floor with Dexter. Dexter may be good, and Dexter has his own like ritual, whereas Frank Castle, you know, he's way more he's a bigger strategist, so to speak. And he uses all kinds of ways to kill people. He doesn't have like one thing like Dexter has. But at the same time, for some reason, maybe it's because Dexter is a character in a television show, I just tend to think that he's the more lucid of the two, and he's the more calculated of the two. So, and I definitely think, I don't trust Frank Castle as much as I trust Dexter Morgan to keep on point, to never lash out against innocent people. But that's simply because it's about the idea of familiarity. I am way more familiar with Dexter Morgan than I am with Frank Castle. With Frank Castle, I've seen the movies, I've read a couple of comic books that he appears in, but I don't actually know that much about the character. I will admit that he would have a higher efficiency because he's so much more adept. He's way more skilled. He has better skills as a fighter, with arms, with armament, and with artillery. Obviously, he would kill a lot more bad people than Dexter could. Dexter has his own little ritual. He needs to get all his shit together, you know. Definitely not as efficient a killer or a vigilante as Frank Castle is, but on the same, maybe it's a good thing. It's a good thing that, you know, Dexter puts so much time and effort into constructing the perfect crime, because he is less likely to make mistakes than Frank Castle, I would imagine. You know, again, I'm not as familiar with Frank as I am with Dexter, but maybe the fact that Dexter is not as efficient, or maybe not even efficient, maybe that's not the right word, but just not as casual about killing people as Frank Castle is. But I definitely think that in terms of calling, both of these guys are 100% determined. They're 100%, you know, unfaltering, unwavering. I think they're just as dedicated. But maybe Dexter has a bigger addiction problem. He's literally addicted to what he is doing. So again, it's very hard for me to compare them. I would love to hear some more detailed thoughts from somebody, because obviously I don't know, I'm not that familiar with Punisher again. But yeah, who out of these two guys, now I'm leaning towards Dexter based on familiarity alone, but really, out of these two guys, who would you want to be real? Now obviously the answer is Batman. We would all want Batman to be real. But I think we can admit it to ourselves that somebody like Batman cannot exist, because somebody in real life doing the things that we would expect Batman to do could not obey the don't kill rule. Just, you know, if you have guys like Joker in the world, common sense dictates that you kill the assholes. So, again, the question is, Punisher or Dexter? Who do you think would make a better vigilante serial killer that would have public opinion on their side? Now, I'm not saying that we need these people to be real. I'm not saying that. I definitely don't think that anybody should play God or judge, jury, and executioner. No. What I am saying is, in a hypothetical situation, which one of these two characters would you be more okay with if they were real? Who would you root for, so to speak? And again, I mentioned you have the option of choosing Rorschach for this. I personally think he doesn't qualify, but for the sake of Deadpoolzilla, I am including Rorschach in this. So yeah, that's the question, and I hope somebody who is more familiar with Punisher and his like mentality and his can give a better description of his own psychology and his own issues could help out with this more. But I'm really looking forward to your thoughts on this particular comparison. And again, it's not a physical fight, because I think we can all agree that Punisher would kick Dexter's ass so hard. But yeah, I look forward to your thoughts on this very cheery subject, which is just awesome for the holidays.